My first thing to tell you is to be kind to yourself. You're learning a new process, and the students are learning a new process. Okay, and so we haven't had the time to learn this. Imagine yourself as a first-year teacher. Even though you've taught for 20 something years, imagine yourself being thrown into a new classroom for the first time. And that classroom's on another planet or in another country.
So welcome back to our channel. Millions of students worldwide are having their education disrupted by the spread of coronavirus. But unlike any time in the past, we can continue education even when schools close. Being able to adapt is one of our strengths as human beings. And pandemic comes suddenly. Time seems to be not enough to prepare good online classes, not to mention some other challenges such as shortage of adequate online teaching skills and online support system. Yet, quick, careful measures need to be taken, and the experts call these situations as emergency remote teaching, ERT. Well, there are always ways for us to go beyond the limits, such as getting some information on the internet and even learning from the experts. And today I have deliberately invited one of the ALT practitioners from the United States, but now he's currently living in Turkey. He is an innovative English language instructor with international teaching experience in diverse cultures. Yes, diverse culture because he has visited some countries and taught English there, like Japan, Ethiopia, and also Turkey, right? He earned his master's degree from California State University, Sacramento, in 2014 with wow GPA. I met him in Chicago in 2018 while attending the TESOL conference. I was sitting outside my academic building. I was having my coffee, enjoying sightseeing. He came to me and we began talking, and that nice talk. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Bob Nguyen. Hi, Bob. How are you?
Hi, how are you? I'm good. I'm doing well. It's hot here in Adana, Turkey. Very humid, and yeah, very hot.
Wow. Please tell me what you've been doing in Turkey.
So I arrived about 2 weeks ago. So my self-imposed quarantine has finished. I feel in good health. But yeah, I've been just slowly getting back into the routine of life here. I kept my apartment even after the quarantine. I just kept the apartment. So it was easy for me to come back. I didn't have to stay in a hotel for 2 weeks. I didn't have to look for an apartment. So yeah, I've been exercising, I do boxing and running outside, some yoga. And so, I think the things that we can do to keep ourselves healthy and to improve our immune system are very important. Yeah.
So even pandemic will never keep us from doing such kind of activities, Bob, right? So it's important to have healthy bodies, right, Bob?
Right. I mean, yeah, a lot of people have learned how to, I like to use the term pivot. So to pivot during this, and so you don't have to change everything. You don't have to find something new, but you can learn new ways of doing the same thing.
That's right.
So that's what we're going to be talking about with online education.
All right, Bob. Now I got some questions to you, and let's jump into one question. Okay. Now, Bob.
Okay.
Everybody goes online, but then you know that everybody is not always ready with this new challenge, right? And my first question to you is that can online teaching provide the same benefit as face-to-face class? What do you think, Bob?
So I think that these things depend on the teacher. These things depend on the students. I think some students do very well in online settings. And I think those students are the students that I like to call introverts. And those students tend to do a little bit better because they're in their own space. They're not around other people. They tend to have better work habits sometimes. So yeah, we have some students that do very well online, and I think other students don't do as well. But I do think that it's up to the teacher to make the online space comfortable for students to interact and also to learn, and mainly I think to ask questions, right? To give feedback and to get feedback from their teacher.
So teachers plays very important role to make the student engaged and they get motivated in the online learning. Is that what you mean,
Right.
Bob? All
And so
right.
so the thing that we always been pushing, right, when we go to TESOL conventions, is this idea of student-centric learning and kind of giving students more control.
Right.
And you can do so once you adopt these principles, and once you put these things into practice, engaging students isn't as difficult, right? If you were able to do that face to face, you could create a lot of engagement instead of just being the teacher that just lectured and talked while your students listened. If you already had like an engagement with your students because they were doing group work, they were answering questions, I think if you have that teaching style and you bring it into the online classroom, it can work the same way.
Right. Okay. And engagement becomes a very important issue in the online teaching because the teaching present in the real condition does not really exist. Is that right, Bob? So teachers are challenged to make, to innovate something new to make the students active, right? Okay, now let's move to next question. Bob, you said that engagement. Now, it is still related to engagement. How can you ensure the quality of participation in the online class?
How do you endure?
Ensure, to make it sure the quality of participation. Yeah.
So for me, and it goes back, so everything I talk about is what I did in the face-to-face classroom. I always had an expectation that students would participate, so if a student sat quietly in the back of the room, they weren't getting away from me. I used different ways of creating participation. So, sometimes I would go down my list, my attendance roster, and call off the students by name. Other times I use like an app, that would automatically call the students. So I was using Google Classroom for my class management stuff before the coronavirus pandemic. And so, I was able to just choose their names. In the past, I've had like popsicle sticks and I've called students. And so I think once students have this expectation that they can't just come to class and sit quietly, and if they can just shrink into the back of the class, if they disappear, students will, I think, become more aware of the fact that they have to participate and they have to be engaged, because I don't think anybody wants to be embarrassed in the classroom.
That's right. Yeah. Bob, that in the online teaching, teachers are challenged to make themselves present because we do not interact with the students just like what we used to do in the classrooms, right? And there's something that that is human touch, right? So how do you add the sense of human touch and maintain your students' retention on the online learning?
I mean, so one of my, we always talk about the teacher ego, teacher persona, right? And the fact that as a teacher, we kind of are like a super version of ourselves. I think online, like that personality, if you get comfortable talking in front of a camera, you can really display that. So I like to use humor in my classroom. And so I always try to work in a little joke here and there. The jokes get the students engaged, but I also I need to hear them. So I usually ask them to turn on their mics. So I do the opposite. Unless they're in a very loud room, I ask my students to turn on their mics. And I'm using Zoom. So I think Zoom, compared to the system that the Turkish university was using, Zoom has a lot more options for teachers. So I can mute the students, I can unmute them. But I usually want the students to actually be their mics on. So if I make a joke, I can hear them laughing, because I think teachers also need to feel like they're not just in a vacuum talking to, in front of a screen, right? Teachers also need to hear feedback from students, and that feedback could just be anything from, yeah, I want to hear that my students are paying attention. I want to know that they're understanding what I'm saying. So it's a two-way street. Like, students have to give me feedback and I have to give them feedback, and maybe to each other as well. And something that I like on Zoom is having the breakout rooms. And with the breakout rooms, we can have small discussions. So, I always try to think about think, pair, share to create more participation. So asking a student's questions and not having, silence is golden. And I think in teaching, teachers need to get more of the silent, get used to silence. So for me, asking the question and giving them time, giving them a minute. And so instead of just, having them think about it, I ask them to write it down somewhere. So write down your answer. And then we're going to go into groups. And so that's what the breakout rooms are. And that's my opportunity as a teacher. If there's 4 breakout rooms, I just jump into one breakout room. I listen, I help them out with the answers. I give them, something that I think is relevant. And then I can jump back and forth. So, we physically can't touch our students in the online class, but I think having smaller groups to interact with makes students a lot more comfortable, right? And same thing, if you see just, on Zoom, 20 blank, blacked out screens because the students aren't sharing their screen, it's intimidating, right? And even for students to react and interact, they don't know what their other classmates are doing or thinking. And so it makes it very uncomfortable, right? And so, yeah, I do encourage students to turn on their camera. And I think moving forward in the next semester, teachers have to create an expectation, and teachers have to tell their students, find a desk to work at, make sure it's quiet, tell your family that you're going to be in class for an hour, but don't be in bed. Don't be eating your food at the table. Don't be on your computer typing to your friend while you're in class. So I think we need to set very clear expectations on how we all participate as a group.
So we need to let them know that, oh, this is our expectation and you have to obey this. And I think I got some inspiration from you that the importance of having a good persona in teachers, like being able to make a jokes. That's sort of the thing that creates a feeling of connectivity with the students, right? Those students become open, they are no longer reluctant to express themselves. But I think that's one of the most challenging things. Do you think using joke is something that we can learn? What do you think, Bob?
I mean, so everybody has their own personality, and everybody has their own way of humor. My thing is that humor is the best way that I get feedback from my students. And so, I've always kind of been the energetic, I always wanted to be like the funny teacher. It didn't work so well when I was younger and I didn't know how to manage my class. But now it's a lot better. But the thing I like about humor is that I know that my students understand the English instructions I'm giving them, So if they're listening, it means that they understood the joke, And so I'm starting to believe that like humor does cross different lines. And, a lot of the times for me, it's physical humor. Like I'll make a face and the students will react, right? And so for me in the classroom, if everybody's laughing, it means that they're paying attention to me. It means that they're engaged. And if, humor is not your thing, there's other ways, I think, to like get students involved. And, I think different tones of voice, speaking slowly, these are things that we talk about when we talk about pronunciation and speaking. But I think as teachers, we need to stop just rapidly going through our notes as quickly as we can to finish the thing, blah, 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 blah. I think we need to really slow down, change the volume once in a while, change the loudness, because that's what makes, keeps students engaged. And yeah, not all of us are comfortable being on a camera. this is new for some people,
Right.
right? Like, I think a lot of people I know don't even like doing like FaceTime chats. They're like, I don't, I didn't do my makeup today, or, you know, and I'm
That's
like,
what
it's
happened with my
okay.
student, you know.
Yeah, right. And so that's the thing. We have to make this clear expectation that, they need to be ready. That means they need to be dressed. That means they need to be in a professional sense, right? Like a professional style before they get onto the thing. But yeah, for me, humor seems to be the best way for me to do it. And I think every teacher needs to find their way, that they're present, right? That their makeup is on, that they're ready, and that they're ready to teach, right?
That's right. All right, Bob. You know that in our class, and even in online class or offline class, we find a student with different backgrounds, diversities prevalent
Mm-hmm.
there. All right. So, you've been to some countries and you've learned a lot with students with different personalities, background,
Yeah.
with the different countries, something like that. Now, how can we as teachers support diversity in an online environment?
So, I mean, I think the first thing that we need to do as teachers is to get to know our students. It's something that I think uh, makes that connection. And it could be anything from a Google Forms survey where you ask your students, what do you prefer to do in class? What is your family's background? Like, I don't think you have to go into like an interrogation about their
Yeah,
what their father or mother does, but
yeah.
I think getting to know that information in the beginning, something that I always do with my first round of classes, is to do a survey. Where they just fill out their hobbies, their interests. So one, I can see what the students in general are interested in doing, like whether it's they enjoy watching Netflix, or they listen to music or things like that. So that gives me like a knowledge of my students. And once I have that, I can figure out like what kind of learning styles there are. But the thing that we need to do as teachers is to know that, let's say there's four major student learning styles that I try to you know focus on. One is like the kind of quiet, shy student
Yeah,
that is very intelligent, knows all the answers, but how do you get them to say things, right? So,
definitely.
feedback to me isn't always that they say the correct answer, right? If you're only asking one student to give the answer, you didn't know, you can't find out if the percentage of students that know the correct answer. So a lot of times, I ask them to write things on a piece of paper that I'll collect later, so that I can just make sure, okay, the student didn't speak during this class, but she or he knew exactly what was going on, right? So, I think students, they don't, I would say introvert students don't need to show people that they know the answer. But yeah, we need to also focus on our extroverted students, because I think our extroverted students, in my opinion, do a lot worse in online classrooms, because they're not allowed to yell out. They're not,
Yeah.
they're muted, and they want to make a joke, they want to say something, but they can't. So, giving all the students the ability to give an answer is great, because you can use the chat box, the chat box function in Zoom, or you can even make a Google form so that they're
Mm-hmm.
looking at the Google form during the Zoom meeting. But I think it's also great to ask for volunteers first, so that one student that needs to talk,
Okay.
is able to express themselves in English. And then the other expectation is that I'm always going to choose somebody randomly in the class to speak, Um, and something I think a lot of teachers get caught up on is the fact that if their students don't know the answer, they just wait, and it's very awkward, so they stop doing that. I think the better strategy is, if the student doesn't know the answer, I say, okay, I'll come back to you, but let's choose another student, and then I'm going to come back to you, okay,
Yeah.
for the next question, right? So there's this expectation that there's kind of zero tolerance in not
Yeah.
answering the questions at some point.
So we have to find ways so that the students can express themselves, right, Bob?
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah.
You said something about expectation. Now, uh, do you think it is connected with ethics? I mean, do you think it is important to teach the students about ethics in the online learning environment, Bob? What do you
So
think?
elaborate on what you mean by ethics. I was gonna ask you about this.
The ethics is about, hey, if you express your ideas in the discussion post, you have to maintain your language. You should not use a rude language, something like that. That's one of the ethics I can
Mhm.
tell you. What do you think about that?
Uh, I mean, so it goes back to expectation, right? In the classroom, I don't, I object to students doing any name calling, bad mouthing. Any of those things are, the expectation in my class is that all students treat each other with respect. And it's kind of the ground rules that I have when I first start a class. And this is really easy to do if you want to start this practice. Is I have like 4 quadrants. It's like the 4 rules I have are respect the teacher, respect your classmates, respect the classroom, and then respect other classrooms. And then that's the general. I give them the opportunity to write in, how do you do this? So how do you respect the teacher? Pay attention, don't talk while they are talking. How do you respect students? Listen, don't laugh when students make a mistake, things like that. Um, I think ethics in teaching. I think as teachers, we're teaching our students how to be. We're modeling,
Yeah,
how
right.
to have good behavior, right? And so, if a teacher is upset, angry, and yells or scolds a student, I think it sets up the expectation that that's fine to do. So we are modeling the way that we want our students to interact. So if we are impatient with our students because they don't understand and we get frustrated, they're going to see that, right? And so I always like to ask myself, why are they frustrated? Is it something that I could do to help this process move along?
Right. So that's interesting. So how can teaching be effective if we cannot show something to the students? I mean, I think the most effective way teaching some things like that is by giving the example. Is that right? Well,
Yes, modeling, definitely.
modeling is very important. Right,
Yeah.
Bob. The last one, the last question. Bob, would you give some motivational word for the teachers here in Indonesia, Bob? That's going to be the last session we have today.
Okay.
Yeah, come on.
So we all know this is novel. This coronavirus is novel. ETR, the emergency, wait, what did you call it? Emergency remote learning,
teaching.
remote teaching. This is all new. So, my first thing to tell you is to be kind to yourself. You're learning a new process and the students are learning a new process, okay? And so we haven't had the time to learn this. Imagine yourself as a first-year teacher. Even though you've taught for 20-something years, imagine yourself being thrown into a new classroom for the first time. And that classroom's on another planet or in another country. This is something I'm used to now, is being thrown into a new country. And so, yeah, we have to learn how to adapt. We have to be open to new ideas. We also have to be open to making mistakes. And I think the other thing I mentioned by accident was this word teacher ego. And to me, that's the fact that, if you don't know something more than your students, then you just don't touch it, right? A lot of us as teachers, and it depends on the cultural context, but a lot of people look at teachers like they're supposed to be the perfect model. And I would always say modeling also means you model the mistakes to students, right? So we kind of have to drop the sense that we are supposed to know everything. And we don't, and we need to ask our students for help. And so, in a lot of ways, they actually know more about this technology. Find the students that, that you have a good rapport with, that maybe after the class, you can ask them for feedback, send out like a Google form that says, hey, what could I do better? And learn from this, right? Because right now there's no other teacher observations going on. Your administration is not showing up to your online class to say, hey, you didn't do that very well. You need to improve on this and this and this. We need to have a better dialogue with our students to let them know that we're open to new ideas, that we're learning. And I think the best way that you're going to be able to teach your students is to get feedback from your students. And that's them saying, hey, this assignment is much, takes way too long for us to do. Can you help us with this? And I have that with my students. My students say, we have a lot of lessons, and I try to tone down how much I'm giving them, because, a lot of times I just want to know that they're, watching the videos, reading the materials. I don't need them to do a 2-hour report every week. And so we have to figure out ways as teachers to give good assessments that show us that our students understand, but it doesn't require them to do 2 hours of work every week. I think it's too much for most students, especially during pandemic, because once we start to have empathy for ourselves and for our students, start to realize, hey, we are all in a new environment, and a lot of us are stressed. A lot of us, there's a lot of fear. There's a lot of bad habits going on at the same time that people are building new habits. This is a time of transition. And yeah, I would just tell yourself, I would say to all the teachers out there, is to be kind to yourself and be open to making mistakes.
Right. Okay. So we have to reflect upon ourselves that we have limitation. We are all learning, but we want to be improving all the time. Thank you very much, Bob.
Yeah,
so
you're welcome.
This is such a very encouraging, empowering conversation. Thank you.
Great.
And I do hope you stay healthy there.
I will. You too. Yeah, it's good to see you again. And I'm glad that, our paths have crossed and come back around. That's the joy for me of teaching English around the world, is this opportunity to be able to provide for you an interview. Yeah, thank you.
Yes, great. Okay, get in touch, Bob. Goodbye.
Bye.